Crouch. Bind. Set.
Joe presents the House of Rugby, powered by Vodafone.
Well, it's a great day here at House of Rugby, powered by Vodafone. No Sean O'Brien, but instead we've got Jack Willis. How good, mate? How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you very much, mate. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Good to see you. How's everything today? A train journey a bit difficult, was it? Or?
Yeah, a bit of a nightmare getting down here. I think all the trains are sort of flooding into London, prioritising the main routes, but out in a little village, Mrs had to cop me out to help me get down here today, which was handy. But yeah, got there in the end. You sound a little bit hoarse, mate. What's going on with the voice?
Yeah, I've been on a stag do in the beautiful location of Clacton-on-Sea. Yeah, highbrow. Sorry to anyone from Clacton-on-Sea who saw me. It wasn't at my finest, but yeah, a bit struggling today.
Shane Horgan, welcome to the show, mate. How you getting on, mate?
Nice to be here as the contractually mandated Irishman. Now that Shawnee's not around, so good to be here.
Well, it's a much nicer surprise for us. Shawnee, as much as he's a funny man, he takes his toll on everyone, I think. So it's good to see you, anyways.
Yeah, no, nice to be here. Thanks for having me. And in the middle of a Lions versus Sharks series, brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And did you watch the game yesterday?
I did. I watched it. The repeat version. It's been a weird series so far, and the fact that they're playing the same opposition, 4 days turnaround. I actually thought the Sharks did unbelievably well for having. I think they had 4 guys that played. The rest were what you're in effect a sort of second Sharks team, and they really put it to the Lions. I think there was, after that first half, I'd say there was some stern enough words at half time. And obviously the sending off wasn't great for anyone, but something I think the Lions needed that game, a little bit of a wake-up call for them, especially around physicality. I didn't think they were physical enough. I was a bit surprised at the scrum as well. You know how dominant the Springbok scrum is going to be, how they base everything around it. They don't, the Sharks held their own, and it meant that some of their big carriers were getting right into the Lions and making big yardage. So I think it'll be a bit of a wake-up call for them second time round.
We'll go into more detail later on. I mean, you've got your notepad here.
Exactly.
Scribble down a few plays.
I'm glad someone's prepared for this, by the way.
Exactly, yeah,
I haven't been hard drinking for 2 days in Clacton.
Yeah, exactly. And that says it all, really. But just in terms of the tour, obviously it's been pretty tough so far. But everyone wants to see the rugby. What are your thoughts in terms of the tour at the moment?
Yeah, it is difficult, because there's this much bigger situation going around the world that everyone's been living through, and it's even more intense in South Africa. But I do think sport and rugby is escapism for people, and as long as it's not endangering anyone, and I don't think it is. I think they should. I think they're right in really trying to aim to get this Test series away. And listen, if that means some of these warm-up games are compromised a bit, I think that's all right. Listen, it's not ideal to have 2 Sharks games off the back, but they did serve a purpose, so we do know a little bit more about the Lions. I think Gatlin probably knows a little bit more about a number of players, and I'd certainly like to see this series go ahead. And selfishly as a supporter, and it's going to be different, right? So you're going to have guys that aren't as well prepared on both sides of the ledger, so it is going to be a very unique Test series. But the one thing that I put myself in the position of a player, and you might never get this opportunity again to play for the Lions. So I kind of think almost they deserve an opportunity to play the series.
I think that's the big thing for me is that these lads have worked hard for the lads that haven't been involved before for 4 years straight to get to this point. I think it would be a shame if it didn't go ahead. I think the worry for me is will we see all 3 tests played? I don't know. It depends what's going on in the South Africa camp. Sort of came out today who had the cases and things like that. And it's just a worry that won't be sort of under control by the time the main tests come along. But I think, let's hope that we keep our fingers crossed it can go ahead. I think whether there's fans there or not, it's still special to put on that jersey for those lads. And some of the lads being fortunate enough to be in camp with someone like Tom Curry, who's been incredible for 4 years. And I think he deserves to be able to wear that shirt in a test match, and hopefully in the coming weeks he can get that chance.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think those you may only get one opportunity to be a Lion and play a test series, and for that reason I would like to see it go ahead. But and it is going to be a unique series, and everyone says, oh listen, Lions is this and that. Lions is whatever the Lions is on that year. So there is hurdles on both sides, so both for the South Africans, and there is definitely a concern about whether the series can go ahead, given the number of outbreaks. But if there's a chance, I think they should be aiming for it.
Yeah, and just on that, you were in the Six Nations with England when Eddie had to isolate. What was that like in terms of a coach? Because obviously the South African head coach has got COVID and will have to self-isolate now. And what was it like in terms of the coaching?
It was the first couple of days of the Six Nation camp, really, where he was sort of coming out of the end of his isolation. But the first couple of days, there was a couple of sort of remote Zoom call meetings with him talking to the group, and then also messages from the other coaching staff, the leadership group of players as well. And I think it's the time for everyone else to step up and adapt. I think it's weird. The weird thing for me, I remember as a youngster or in the academy or anything like that, for us it used to throw us off so much if the game was 50-50 if because of weather or snow or something like that. Whereas now it's just like every other week, every game that comes, I think players have learned to adapt and be ready for anything. And I think the Lions have been great. They've adapted. The Sharks were great to be able to play them again. But I think the guys that need to worry is South Africa. They've only just come out of their isolation period. They've all been locked in their rooms. It's going to be tough to sort of reconvene and get back going after against the Lions squad that have been playing games at least.
I was going to say, I mean, the coaching is here and there. It doesn't really matter too much. Players will get out there and prepare as well as they can, and they're very experienced. They've got so many leaders, South Africa. That's fine, I guess. I think it's more preparation-wise. Who's struggling more here? The Lions may not have as many games. South Africa have not played for 2 years until that Georgia game, and then another game they're going to miss out on preparation-wise.
But also not just not playing. That's one thing. But I'm not sure what their training schedule is, or what they're allowed to do, or what they will be allowed to do, especially with these new outbreaks. Is it a sort of total isolation in their rooms?
They've been in their own hotel rooms for the last 10 days, and you think that's going to have an effect on the group. Obviously, the Lions will be under a pretty tight bubble, but there's going to be socialisation in and around training and things like that. They're going to be able to build the sort of group camaraderie that you want. For South Africa, as you say, it's been a long time since they won that World Cup. Yeah. They obviously ride on that for a little while, but it takes a lot of work to go up against the Lions and win a Test series. So I think there's a few new players in there. Quite a few Premiership lads have sort of earned their opportunity and gone across into the squad. It's an interesting one how it's going to sort of play out in that first game.
Even conditioning wise, what can they do? They're going to be off the pace a little bit. I don't know sure what they can do in the hotel rooms, or they have access to gyms or whatever. But you got to think they're going to be undercooked.
Well, I mean, the only way you get match fit is from playing games. We all know that. You can go on the treadmill and run all day, but it's getting used to game intensity, and that for both teams in a sense though, because the Lions have they're doing everything possible and they're trying their best, but is there going to be even more competition in training now because of that, or does it really mean it's a problem preparation for them as well?
That match fit thing is really interesting, because you'll remember this from when you're doing your pre-season training and you're absolutely killing yourselves and you think you're the fittest you've ever been, but you go out and play the match, you start cramping up 20 minutes into
it. You can't breathe.
What's going on here? And so it is a different type of training. But with the Lions, it'll be interesting to see what the key factors are in selection. Whether Gatland is saying it'll be very much on what these performances are, and the performances up to the first test, or is he going to rely on, I suppose, the body of work that the players have. So I think Conor Murray is the perfect example of that. Now, I don't think Conor's had a brilliant 18 months, but by any measure, he had a very good game against England in the last game. All of a sudden, he's the Lions captain and starting without, I'd say, a huge amount of brilliant form. But I do think Gatland is going to revert back to who he trusts, and that's why I think you'll see a lot of sort of Welsh players.
I think it's interesting though, because obviously you're saying about sort of players he trusts. Someone who's obviously just been called into the squad, Marcus Smith. Finn Russell, unfortunately, out with a bit of an injury. Hopefully, he'll still be fit at some point in the tour. But Marcus Smith sort of played a couple of games for England, been playing really well for Harlequins. I think it's the exact right thing to do, bringing him into the squad. But it's interesting to sort of see, you say, sort of going back to the players he trusts. I think he still wants a bit of a spark there, bringing in Smith. I don't know what you think about.
I think it was a really smart move, and he was right to do it. I think it was probably based on a number of factors. One, that he's playing brilliantly. You know, the semi-final, the final. You know, a couple of games with England. He's the bright young thing. He's going to have a brilliant career with England, I think. But it also is not going to disrupt the group. It's going to be very positive for the group. You bring in, Sexton, and you would think that Sexton, was unlucky not to make it. But you bring him in, and all of a sudden, he's trying to boss training. You know that he's thinking, I want that first test shirt. I've come in here. I'm going to sort of take over, and and that's legit for him to do it. But it's probably not what would be best for the group. You've got Mark's coming in. He'll come in. He'll be so delighted to be there. He kind of knows the role he'll have to play. He's, Bigger's not going to feel that he's a threat to him, really. Farrell isn't going to feel he's a threat to him, I don't think, because, he's not going to start in he's not going to be a starting line in the first test. So it just keeps the balance, very nice. And it's brilliant for him. There's nothing better for your development than to go on a Lions tour. And that's why, from an Irish perspective, I was really disappointed when James Ryan didn't go on it, because he's going to be a future Ireland captain. But the experience that you gain from going on the Lions, I remember in 2001 when I was playing for Ireland at the time, didn't make that Lions tour to Australia. But I remember, Ronan, who was captain the same day as me, he went over and with Brian and there's a few others, but he really came back a different player. Just looked on things totally different. You're just exposed to a higher level of rugby, intellect, different types of training, and it really changes you. And I even after 2005, I thought just the way I started to think about rugby and training was really different as well, mainly because we were so small and everybody else seemed to be so massive. I was like, what the hell are we doing in the gym that we're not doing what anybody else here is doing? That's for sure.
Yeah, but if Bigger got injured though, do you think they still would have called up Marcus, or do you think someone like Ford, Sexton, then Sheedy, someone else would have been called up?
Yeah, I think he may have had a look at Sexton then. I think he may have, deliver, I think, a sort of similar game plan. I think it was one or other of those guys. And to be honest with you, I think Bigger was probably the right selection. He's played so well for so long. Sexton's been up and down. His injury profile hasn't been great. And he hasn't played a lot of rugby since in the last few months. So it would have been difficult to select him, but you might have gone with him if it was Bigger. Maybe just, I don't know if you were looking for a player to start the first test, where you would go, whether Marcus would naturally be a natural fit. But I think Farrell's probably next up if there was an injury to Bigger.
I think for me, sometimes it's looking at the wider picture of the whole group, and someone like Marcus Smith coming in, the energy he's going to bring to the whole group and pushing in training, even if he's just running the non-23 for a couple of weeks, having someone like him testing the defence is really going to push them on. I think you just watching the game was quite funny, the England game, seeing him come off. So it looked like he sort of dragged off, wasn't it? Sort of shepherd's crook grip again, sort of dragged off the field. He was straight into the tunnel. He said that he didn't know what was going on. He was terrified that he was in trouble. But he literally just absolutely baffled and couldn't believe it. And I think seeing that, someone that's so full of energy, so full of life, that's going to go into that now. He's probably on the flight today or tomorrow, and it's just going to be full of energy and be great for the group. I love
it. It's properly romantic. There's probably something beautiful about it. And if you look at the last couple of months that he's had, have been, it's schoolboys' own stuff. It's it's dream come true. He's just been so amazing.
He's making defenders look like school kids. That's for sure.
He really is. He's so brilliant, and he's just gone to another level. And you don't get this whole other things of the Lions bolter. It doesn't exist anymore, really. You're not going to have someone really who's not well known, because you've got the domestic competitions and you've got Europe. If you're not playing in those areas very well for a period, no one's going to take they're not going to take the risk on you, or you're going to be an established international. So the idea of the bolter doesn't really exist anymore in the modern Lions. This is as close to a bolter as you're going to get. He and his experience, the delight on his face, and what he must be experiencing now. It's a proper beautiful rugby story.
It's fantastic for him, as we established. He'll bring so much energy, and he'll just go out there and train so hard or soak it all up. And you know what? If there is injuries, maybe he will get in the team. But he's match fit, he's ready, he's in the form of his life, and I think it's so exciting for him to be involved. But I also think, though, late additions now, people coming, it's such a small amount of time now before that first test that it would be very hard for someone to come in now and expect them to get up to speed and start in that first test.
What do you think of someone like Marcus Smith? What do you think he can bring to the group? How do you think he plays that can sort of be an advantage for the Lions, even if it is the midweek games, Goodie?
Yeah, I think Marcus is such a talent. We've seen the glimpses and the areas where he's so good with his footwork and his ability to beat defenders. But what I've been so impressed with him over the last 6 months or so, this year particularly, is he's mixed his kicking game really well with his running game. And when there's a chance on, he will take it. He sees it, he wants to go wide, and he goes for it. He doesn't think about it or hesitate. He just goes with conviction. And what I think he brings to any team is the ability of a fly half, a bit like Finn in the sense that he can beat you one-on-one, but he's so elusive. Like, I think people can't grasp how good he is as a runner. Like, his ability to, you line him up and it might be the third forward out, he's got him, and suddenly he just steps back on the inside to throw the inside ball, and he's gone past that forward already, and they're clutching, and then once he's in behind, he's electric. So I think he will be someone who will certainly test out all the other players defensively out there. He'll help out in that regard. But I think just as a threat, he's someone who's so dangerous.
Yeah, his variation of his game is really excellent, and that's really what you want from a good 10. It's kick, pass, run. Which of those decisions do you make? He makes them very instinctively, which is again exactly what you want from your 10. And interesting that comparison with Finn Russell, who is again I think a very sort of instinctive player in many ways, but sometimes I feel as if he feels there's an obligation on him to throw that big ball over the top or pull a rabbit out of a hat, which then can get you in trouble, and that's why it gets him in trouble, and that's why he's probably not going to be a Lions starter, because he doesn't always play what's in front of him. He has a pre-programmed idea to go, I'm going to do something special now, and does it. Whereas I think Marcus is still playing incredibly instinctively and picking the right options. He's playing what he sees in front of him, not a few phases back, thinking, oh, when next time I get the ball, I'm going to try this, because that gets you in dangerous positions.
So the rugby over the last 5-6 days, I think it is. What were your thoughts, Jack, in terms of who's standing out now, who's looking fantastic, who looks like they're going to be a definite starter?
I think for me, the back three at the moment is incredibly competitive. It looks ridiculous. I think for me, Anthony Watson.
I didn't expect you to go to the back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I thought we might go back row here.
That is confidence. That is real confidence. I'll run through the props in a couple of minutes. I really have my eye on.
I just think for me, a couple of players that stood out yesterday was Anthony Watson. For me, I thought was fantastic, but Van der Merwe was ridiculous. I think again and again he's performed incredibly well, and it'll be hard not to pick him. But going back to sort of more where you feel I belong in the back row.
Didn't say that.
Yeah. Tad Byrne, I think, has been incredible. For me...
Tyg Byrne. Come on.
Tyg Byrne.
How often are you doing this with Shawnee and you haven't got your Irish pronunciations right?
Tyg Byrne. He's been brilliant, I think. He's incredible over the ball at the breakdown. He's rapid as well and offers quite a lot in attack. I think at line-out time, which is probably an area that is going to be key going into the tests. I think probably not dominated in any of these games enough yet to sort of to the level they want to be dominating at. But for me, I think he's got to start 6, and it'll be interesting to see how the sort of back row unfolds around that. But yeah, there's a couple of lads that have really started to put their marker down. It's been good to see.
I agree with Tyg Byrne. Also, I think he had a very solid game yesterday. He was very industrious. Got a couple of tries. He's very good at the back end of the tackle, turning over. The choke tackle, that side of things. Over the ball, brilliant. I'd like him to see him carry a little bit more aggressively. He's not that big carrier, but he's a very good link player. He's smart. He can drop that ball out behind, and we saw more of that, I think, in the opening couple of games of the tour than we certainly did last time out. But it's interesting then what happens to the rest of that back row if he goes in at 6. Are you looking like, does Tom Curry, is he, you're looking at him as a 7? You think that, Gatland's going to pick Faletau, but I don't think he's been brilliant in form, but I think he will get picked there. But that's a really interesting area because, if you don't have your back row tight against the Springboks, you'll probably lose the game.
I think where the game's going to be won and lost is the breakdown and the physicality around that against South Africa. So for me, Tom Curry's got to be at 7. He's not had his chance properly to lay down a marker in a Lions shirt in these sort of games the last couple of weeks, but I'd imagine he'll get a run out before the tests come around. And I think for me, he's earned that shirt over the last 4 years. It's not just these next couple of weeks. I think you can trust that when you go out there against South Africa that he'll deliver, and it will be interesting to see what they do at 8. I think Jack Conan's he's offered something a little bit different and actually sort of showed how dominant a carrier he can be. But for me, Curry at 7's got to be locked in. Hamish Watson's been fantastic, but Curry, for me, has just got that extra level of physicality.
Well, yeah, Watson was soft in a couple of contacts against the Sharks on Saturday, and what it meant was he took the soak tackle, and then it meant the next wave was very, was really aggressive from the Sharks, and that was getting then into the 10 channel. So Bigger was having to make a tackle against a massive man, sort of one-on-one with a little bit of space either side of him after a really fast ruck, and you just can't have that. You can't get that situation. So you need to drop the South Africans at source and not allow those soak tackles. So I think Curry's the man for the job there. I think Tyburn is good in that area as well. The other thing that I found sort of interesting, I think Jamie George is having a good tour so far, but the lineouts last time out against the Sharks were all to the front, and I think it was against Japan in that first game at home, there was a lot going to the back, and I thought, well, actually, this is very progressive. I think it's probably what they need to do. I don't know if going to the front of the line out against the Springboks is listen, you win your ball, but what can you do with it?
As a back, that attacking wise from a line out is actually no point. If you go to the front of the line out as a fly half, fullback, whatever, you can't attack. It's impossible. The tail gunner, the 7 or the hooker will be off the back. He'll be in your line straight away. The whole back line get up quicker. So you need to win the ball back or middle, and sometimes you'll lose a few doing it, but it is worth doing it because otherwise you just have to maul it, and you can't take South Africa on winning at the front and go into their 7 hooker 10, 12, all lining up ready to hit you. It just won't work.
They'll eat you. They'll absolutely eat you. That's exactly what they want. But I was wondering at the time, is it being held back? Is it something that they're going to spring on them? Because if you saw against Japan, there was a couple of balls. There was a lot of ball at the tail. There was the one right over the top that went to Farrell. That was a beautiful drop-off move. And then it's been gone, So I'm just wondering if they've tried it, think, actually, we can do this, and then maybe hold back a little bit. I don't know. I hope so, because I tell you, they're not going to win this series by being conservative.
No.
They definitely won't.
I think there's a balance there. I think I completely agree from an attack point of view. You need top quality ball all the time, and that for me sort of ties in nicely that you think that Jamie George will probably get the number 2 jersey for the first test because of his quality of throwing. But for me, I think
Ken Owens will get it. I think I look, play with Jamie. I think he's phenomenal. He's a great leader. He's such a good hooker. I just think Ken Owens is probably the man at the moment who's going to start. And Jamie will come off.
If you think about from their perspective, at line-out time, at set-piece time, it'll be interesting to see who they think is the better scrummager as well, because that's obviously a key part of South Africa's game that we need to sort of cut out, really. But line-out time, I think you were talking about sort of where they're throwing the ball a lot of the time. So you've got to have that balance of wanting to retain possession, start to maybe challenge them up front at maul time, and sort of show that dominance early on. I think for me, we've not really seen that from the Lions in the game so far, that they've really laid a marker from minute one of that they're the dominant pack. And going into the next game, I think it would be nice to see scrum time, maul time, line-out time, them absolutely blitz the pack off the park, and it gives them a nice little confidence boost going into the first test.
The decision for that hooker role might be based purely on scrummaging. Do you know that? Because I think Jamie is much better around the field. He's more explosive. I think he's a bit of a nightmare to defend against. One of the Lions' best ball carriers. But there may be the edge for Ken in the scrum, and if you don't have that, if you don't have at least parity in the scrum, you're in big trouble. And that was, I mentioned earlier, one of the big concerns for me against the Sharks. Just wasn't a dominant scrum performance at all, and that may be the starting test front row. And there was they had no go forward in the scrum whatsoever. And in the defensive scrum, you could see the Sharks number 8 was like picking the ball up. He got 10 meters to run into bigger. And again, that's an absolute nightmare, because it's not just that 10 meters made. It's that's a fast ruck ball, and then it's that second wave of absolute monsters from South Africa getting into the next channel.
I mean, I'm a bit of a nose. I was watching the first test 12 years ago, South Africa, and the first try they scored.
Those long winter evenings must just fly by.
That's what happens in your off season. I've got a new puppy. I've just sat there. But I remember seeing it, and they literally went scrum. They kicked into the corner. They got the scrum 5 yards out, and they went 12 straight up from 9 into the thing. Then I think it was Spies. I can't speak. Yes. Ran the corner, and then John Smith ran the corner, and they scored. And it's, even more so now with South Africa. If they haven't got the game preparation that they want, they're going to go back to basics.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
They're going to kick a lot, and they're just going to put the ball in front of them and go, right, we're going to hit you every time you come out.
If you were that coaching group now, you're sat there going, right, everyone's suddenly now we're finally coming out of isolation. How are we going to go about? It may not be the prettiest rugby, but how are we going to go about taking the Lions apart? It's going to be dominating at scrum time. They've got a chance to just go after it in training, go after it at maul time, and then just go back to basics, like you say, big ball carries, nice and simple, and then challenge them under the high ball as well. It also
controls tempo, because they won't want a quick game.
No.
There's 2 games at altitude. They'll want to slow it down. They want it at their pace, and that's what the Lions can't afford to happen. They can't allow South Africa to get into their own rhythm, tempo, walk to the line outs, maul, and then walk again. It won't work.
That tempo point is interesting, because I thought against Japan you could see the Lions, there was a marked increase in their tempo. It was a big thing. They were like running to the lineouts. They were, as soon as the penalty was there, they were kicking to touch. If there was a tap, it was a tap and go. So you could see them. You could see the eye, in the mind's eye of the coaches going, South African are going to pick a monster pack. They're just going to pick mutants, and as many as they can across the back line as well. And because they're not going to have the time, to work on the more intricate plays, and it's not really their best suit anyway. So we're going to try and up the tempo to drag them around the park a bit and do their legs. And again, I don't think we've seen that sort of tempo again since that first game, and that is something they need to be thinking about, because the South Africans will certainly be trying, the Springboks will be trying to slow everything down.
And just talking of tempo, and you mentioned the back 3, who has impressed you in terms of back 3?
They all have, actually. I think.
So if you were picking your back 3,
it is so difficult, and I love watching them all play as well. And I think you've got there's a balance to the back 3 that you have to figure out as well. And I think that is quite difficult, because they're all putting their hands up. You would thought after the first 2-3 games of this tour, you go, right, Josh Adams is locked down. That's he's done that. There's no question there. Then you see the sort of the performance that Reece Samet had, and last time I love the way he plays. I love having that electrifying pace on the wing, and there's also something about those 2 guys they're riding a wave at the moment, and you think. There's something about the Lions, and we've seen it in tours gone by. You go, when you've got a player like that, or players like that, get them on the field. Yeah. It doesn't matter about their history. It doesn't matter what they've done for their country. Actually, when you have them on that and they're on fire, just keep them. And I know there's Josh Adams has scored so many tries, and some of them are gimmies, but there's something about scoring a try if you're back 3 as well. it just elevates your confidence. And it's sort of the more you try, the more you score, the more opportunities you'll get to, because you're just ravenous for it. So you've got those two guys. Then you've got, pick one out of Liam Williams and Hogg. Like, I think he'll go with Williams, but you'd lose something if you don't have Hogg on the team as well, in a big way. And then, I thought Watson was exceptional yesterday, like really, really exceptional. And I'd almost disregarded him because the other two guys were playing so well. He's right back in there now. And it's like his footwork, his size, everything about him, I thought it was phenomenal. And then Van der Merwe as well. He's, you said at the top of the show, he's been exceptional. I think he's super physical, and Gatlin will like that, so he's in for a shout with that. But I do think he sort of strikes me as a sort of player that works really, really, he really stands out against the teams that are below excellent, where he has some flaws in his game, and passing is definitely one of them, that would show up at test level. Listen, he's a test player, but at Lions test level.
I think I agree with that, in the sense that I think he is someone who defensively I would worry about him. I think there's a couple of clips in the Six Nations where he just got exposed, and it's not the one-on-one tackling, of course, he's a big man, he's good at that. It's more the decision making of when to press, when to hold off. And I thought he got caught again in the game in midweek. He struggled in that sense. But for me, you have to play Liam Williams. And I know I probably bang on about it all the time on the show, people are bored of hearing it, but Liam Williams has to play because of his aerial skills, and I would have him at 15. I think Hogg's a fantastic player, but the game is going to be one in the skies. And
Do you think you could slip Hogg on the wing, or would that not work?
You'd have to put Liam Williams on the wing and put Hogg at fullback. But I just feel I'd have this feeling. I think you have to have Liam Williams there, and I would go Josh Adams and Anthony Watson, and then all three of them are very good in the air. And that's a big part of it, as well as having the speed of Anthony Watson, the finishing of Josh Adams.
Yeah, I think he'll go with Liam Williams as well, and I could understand why he does it. I think Hogg on the counter-attack is slightly better, but then, 4 years ago, he changed the tour. Yeah. He is ambitious, and he's got guts, and he'll try things, which is phenomenal. But you're right. You definitely need that aerial dominance. Every time you've ever played South Africa, your coach will say, we have to dominate the air with this gang, and if you don't, we're not going to win. So, and I think he's tried and tested. He's a brilliant player. It's just you're leaving out Hogg, and that's so disappointing. And normally, if it was under other circumstances, you go, listen, how do we get him into the team somewhere else? Can we find him a place in the wing? But the competition is so strong. You've got out and out wingers that know that job perfectly, and they're just playing too well not to pick the guys you mentioned. Whether it's Watson or whether it's Reece Ahmed on the other wing, I'm fairly agnostic about it, but there's something about Reece Ahmed's just proper electric sprinter's pace that there's a real comfort in it, and that's a part of my kind of experience as a player with Leinster and Ireland. I played on one wing for years with Dennis Hickey on the other, and Dennis was like a proper sprinter speed. I remember my sisters always used to say, they'd be watching the game, and when Dennis got the ball, it was like someone press fast forward, and they never said that when I was on it, let me tell you. But having that comfort of having someone that gets the ball in any space and finishes, there's a real comfort in that right the way through the team.
And that's where I think Josh Adams, for me, I saw some stat the other day. I think every league he's been in, he's been the top try scorer tournament, and you need people who are going to score you tries. Ultimately, it's a simple thing to say, but you can't just go play South Africa and think you're just going to win through kicking and penalties. When the chance comes, you need him there, and that's why, for me, he has to start. So now, during the course of the series, subscribers to the official British and Irish Lions app, powered by Vodafone, can vote for the player of the series. So after 3 games, who for you guys is leading the charts? Who's been the man of the series so far?
It's a little early in the series, but I suppose it's people putting themselves in a position to have big performances when it counts, which is in the test matches, because all of this is really window dressing when it comes to it. So it's about, one, put themselves in a position to get in the team, and also having a kind of a body of work that gives them confidence to be able to perform during the test series. So like, and we've spoken about all these guys before. I think Tyke Byrne certainly is a player who's produced each time he's played for the Lions so far. I think Jamie George has done really well as well. But listen, stand out by a million miles is Josh Adams. He scored about 40 tries in the last 4 games. Like, he's on top of everything. He's created tries as well. His basics have been really good. He's just, we said it earlier on, he's on fire, and he's riding a wave, and the Lions now have to ride that wave along with him and make sure whatever their sort of practice moves are, that they're ensuring that he's getting time on the ball. How many actions can he have over the course of a game? And I know that sounds silly, but my own experience, again, playing in an Irish team that had Brian O'Driscoll for so long, a lot of our plays were, how do we put Brian in space so we can make the best of his talent, and or how can we use him as subterfuge to take players out of position to make room for others. And listen, Josh Adams is having such an exceptional series to this point. They need to be thinking about, how can we get him the ball?
For me, he's obviously a standout. What about yourself, mate?
I think Tag Byrne for me has been the standout. I know there's a name, Tom Curry, for me hasn't had his chances yet fully. He's only played has he had one start so far, the game?
Yeah, one start.
Yeah, another game for him under his belt. And when the games start to become a little bit tighter and closer, more physical against South Africa, that's when you're going to see the best of Tom Curry. It's not necessarily in these games where you're sort of scoring 70 points. So for me, here and now, it's Tag Byrne, but I think Tom Curry's the sort of one to watch for me.
Fair, and the fans have voted already, and at the moment Josh Adams is miles ahead, as expected. And then it's Hamish Watson, Duhan van der Merwe and Lewis Rees-Zammit. So, yeah, head over to the official British and Irish Lions app, powered by Vodafone, to pick your player of the series, and also pick your starting Lions team. So I won't put you on the spot for that now, don't worry, it's too early. But
need a bigger notepad.
Yeah, I know. I've got about 3 things written down here. It's a goldfish memory.
So now it's time for our Bok on the ground, Schalk Brits. How are you, mate?
Guys, fantastic. Watching the Wimbledon, and then I've got the Euros tonight. So what a fun-filled Sunday.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, you're all in white as well, looking fantastic, ready to play yourself.
Yes, I'm ready. That's the outfit of the day. Go big, enjoy Wimbledon. We've got cucumber sandwiches. I've got a Bloody
sandwiches. Mary. You sound English.
and proper scones with strawberry jam and cream.
Nice. Well, look, we won't keep you for too long there. It sounds like you want to get back to that. But apart from hearing what you're eating for lunch, how are things in South Africa? What's the latest there?
Well, Goodie, since the last time we spoke, COVID is now running wild in the Bok camp. We have one false positive test with the Lions, and it's just, I don't know what I'm allowed and not allowed to say what's happening in the Bok camp, but it's been a week.
You can tell us what are the boys telling you?
No, it's quite with all these protocols and guys getting tested positive, coaches testing positive. It's been a week of improvisation. What's the right word?
Say it in Afrikaans. Improvisation. I can just get it out.
Quite a bit during the week, so it's not great for training or preparing for the Lions. But I mean, yeah, it's COVID times and you have to improvise.
So are you concerned for the preparation for the South Africans at the moment? Is it a real worry?
Yeah, I mean, not playing a game this weekend is quite a nightmare. Luckily, on a positive note, we can't get any injuries, I guess. But I think it's both ways. I mean, we want to play rugby. If I look at the Lions game against the Sharks both weekends, it was quite disappointing. I mean, you can't really see how. I mean, it's they played against a substandard Sharks team, and it's actually sad to see the Lions not getting challenged enough. So they're not getting out of that game what they wanted.
South Africa A. What will be the makeup of that South Africa A side? You know, is it going to be a lot of the starters? Is it just people who haven't had game time? What are we expecting from South Africa there?
I would think, Goodie, if I was Rusty and I don't know, or Jock, I would actually the guys that've been training the last couple of weeks inside the squad that aren't really didn't have opportunity against Georgia to have a go. So if that was me, I would do that. I don't know if they're going to do that or give the guys that are starters sort of more time on the pitch. But I would guess Jock would put the guys that was on the fringe to put up their hand and say, okay, give me a go, kind of thing.
And you'd hold back then the guys who are going to start in the Test series. You'd just wrap them in cotton wool or look after them in that regard.
Yeah, well, unfortunately the preparation isn't ideal. So I would say, okay, fine. Maybe we'll from his perspective. I know you want a strong start, but you would say, okay, fine. We'll get better as the series progresses. So I'll make sure that the other guys that's been training for the last 6 weeks or 5 weeks, give them a go. Try for them to soften up the boys a little bit, and then from that perspective, give the guys that's had a go, played one Test match. You throw them in, and hopefully they'll perform with limited preparation.
Mate, one of the things that we were discussing earlier, and we were a little bit disappointed in Saturday's performance with the Lions, was the lack of aggression and physicality. It just seemed to be a little bit below what it should be, especially thinking what they're going to come against the Springboks in the first test. Did you have a view on that? What did you think? Did you think they were off? Do you think they're building?
Shane, I actually don't know. They still put 70 points behind the Sharks, and for me it was still they gave away some easy tries, but the physicality was up there. It wasn't the same as last weekend with the Sharks, that I will agree with. But no, I don't think so. I think they will front up when the big games come. I mean, it is weird times, but I must say they still smashed the Sharks. From my perspective, I was actually disappointed with the physicality, except bar one or two plays from the Sharks' perspective. But I mean, the gain line, the Sharks couldn't get past it.
And Schalk, one thing we were sort of discussing earlier is obviously South Africa being in isolation at the moment, and they're sort of just coming out and having that sort of shortened time frame to prepare for the Test series. How do you think they're sort of going to play? Do you think they're going to tighten up and focus on sort of scrum and set piece dominance, or do you think we'll see the South Africa we did at the World Cup?
Jack, I don't think they can change much. I mean, the prep has been disrupted. With COVID, a lot of the boys had to train with weights in their room and do like a Zoom kind of fitness. So Andy Edwards was in charge of that to make sure the guys are actually fit and ready to what standard they can be. Training pitch on the time was disrupted through all the things that happened in camp. So no, I do not think they'll change anything from what they did at the World Cup. I think we're going to have a big focus on our set piece from a line-out, scrum, mauling, keep it tight kind of perspective, and we're going to ask sort of Andre and Willie to lead from that perspective. But yeah, I don't think they'll change much.
Well, Sculler, we'll let you get back to your cream teas and salmon. Thanks for joining us. It was great to see you, and we'll see you soon.
Lots of love, boys.
Cheers,
and everyone
mate.
out there.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Stay
pal.
safe.
So yeah, it was nice to catch up with Schalk Brits, who's having a tough life out there, clearly. But Shane, just about your experiences. Obviously, 2005, you went on the Lions tour. What do you sort of remember from that tour?
I loved it. I loved the Lions because I sort of grew up in a household where there was this romance about it as well. And my dad is from New Zealand, and so I was being told stories about Tony O'Reilly, touring out there as a 17-year-old, and Dad listening to it on the radio when he was a kid, and rugby fanatic, and a house where it was all about rugby, and then all the way through. Ireland has this great connection with the Lions, and I'm not sure about you guys, I'm a bit older, but the 97 tour and Keith Wood and living with the Lions, that sort of then kind of re-energised it for everyone, and then a few years later I was playing for Ireland, so it was a live option all of a sudden. So it was honestly probably the biggest thing in my career to certainly at that point was to be picked for the Lions. So I was so delighted, and I remember myself and Dennis Hickey found out at the same time, and we went out that night and we sort of made a pact, and we said, well, listen, we don't know if we're going to be test starters, we want to be. But there's a lot of people on the tour and we're saying, well, we're going to buy into everything about the Lions and contribute to it, and not, to savour the experience, but also recognise that the Lions isn't about the individual at all. We're all motivated to get in the test team, but it's not. It's about more than that. It's contributing to the whole piece. So, so we aim to do that and did aim to. So, I loved being on the Lions tour. Now, it was ultimately a really unsuccessful Lions tour. And, we got spanked in 3-0 in the series. So, that's how every Lions team gets judged. So, that 2005 is a complete write-off for everyone. But it was a massive point in my life. And I was so happy to be involved in it, So it's difficult, to have that kind of complex experience with it. And I would have loved to play in another Lions tour, because I think we probably didn't have the balance quite right.
I was going to say, because there's a lot made of that tour and having a complete divide between the teams and having different coaches for different teams there. What was it like, though, in that sense? Did you have time to bond with the players? Did you get that Lions experience of socialising together with everyone else?
I think everything that was done with the Lions tour was the best intentions, and I think a lot of it was driven by Clive Woodward, and he had success with the England team in the World Cup by being exacting with logistics and how not leaving anything to chance, and almost taking a kind of a somewhere between an accountant's and a sort of a management consultant's view of things, and that worked for England. But the Lions is a different thing, so it didn't quite work for us in terms of the bond of the team. And listen, there was a bond of the team, but not quite. And listen, I was at fault as well that we just didn't have. I had a beer before we left in Cardiff, and then I didn't have a beer again. I went out with guys, but we didn't have a beer again until after the second test we'd lost. And in retrospect, that probably wasn't a smart thing, because the emotional side of rugby, and not just in the Lions, but in any team you're in, there's an emotional side of it. You need to feel sort of good about yourself and the team. And New Zealand is quite a difficult place to feel good about yourself when you're touring in the middle of winter anyway, And it was a very hostile environment to go into. And I something that I was never really used to, because I was coming from an Ireland perspective, and I suppose it wasn't ideal, because nobody saw Ireland really as a threat when you toured there. So it was a great welcome. Listen, the lads are here, we're going to beat them, but we'll have a laugh with them afterwards. Yeah. And Ireland was still in that phase, whereas now it was the British and Irish Lions. And you'll know this from your English experience. It's more hostile when you go into different environments, because England have been a threat, and they were the world champions at that time. So and we were playing against a brilliant New Zealand team. That's maybe one of the best teams ever. So all those things came together to mean we didn't have a successful tour.
It's always a toss-up, isn't it, for coaches and teams, for having a few beers together and having a few nights out over the course of a tour or pre-season or whatever, and the sort of impact it will have on you physically and the sort of professionalism. But also, for me, it's always so important, as you say, bringing guys together, new guys that need to get to know each other, having those stories and bringing the sort of emotional feel into the group. And I think that's where having a few beers together and having a couple of nights out can have such a positive impact, and sometimes for me outweighs the sort of the significance of the impact it can have on you physically.
Yeah, and I suppose my career sort of spanned professionalism almost. So early days when I was playing, we were out after every single game, and we had brilliant time, but we paid a price for it as well. With Leinster, we won it was a Celtic league, the inaugural one, and we just smashed it for then 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks, and we blew our chances in Europe because just because of the physical toll it took on us. And then I think we learned a little bit from that England side that just seemed to us from the outside so incredibly professional, and just every I dotted, every T crossed, and you would have heard of the stories coming out of the way they were training and the way they were looking after themselves, and they ultimately won the World Cup based on that. So I think there was almost a flip, all the way to the other side, where we're thinking this, the whole social side of things, there was no benefit into it. And I think now the balance.
There's a balance.
There's a balance. You can see it. I keep on talking about this sort of emotional element to rugby. and all the training that everyone does, the tactics, the personal development. But if you can see, if the team that isn't emotionally connected and doesn't provide that emotional performance in the biggest games, they generally don't win. If there's not that emotional side of things.
I know we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago about the Premiership final, but you could see that in Harlequins when they played Exeter. Exeter looked a little bit deflated. They won it before, they didn't want it. But you see, talk about that emotional energy that was there in excess really. For Harlequins, they just didn't know. You could tell from the first minute that they believed and wanted to win that trophy, and it does make a massive difference. As you say.
And you can't rely on it. It can't be what gets you through. Like, you're not going to win a league by relying on emotional performances. Yeah. Each week, but so you have to have all the other stuff as well. But there has to be a reserve there of emotion for those biggest occasions if you want to maximise your performance, and it's difficult. That's why it's difficult, to win a domestic trophy and win Europe, 1 week after another, because if there's a massive emotional outpouring to win a trophy, and there's definitely a lull then, so to try and get back up to a physical an emotional state that drives your performance a week later, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think everyone needs a reason why. It won't work just through being paid more than other people or anything like that. It's purely your reason why. Why is it that Quins were so energetic or could get over the line? Because they had something dragging them through. Exeter, we don't know what was missing from them, but they didn't have it. But it's the same with any football, rugby, cricket, anything. If the team has a real purpose, a reason, then it can drag you through. And you can't rely on just emotion, of course, but it can really help you in those difficult
It's really
moments.
interesting. It's one of these intangibles that it's very hard to put your finger on, but I'm sure you've had a sort of similar experience. When we won the Heineken Cup for the first time, Leinster, I remember 6 months before that, were absolutely being written off. We knew we had good players, but we hadn't performed the way we should, and it looked as if we were going to have a complete non-issue of a season, and we turned it around. And it just something felt like this was meant to be. And I don't believe in destiny or anything like that, but it just felt like, hang on, we were on this journey together. And I remember Sexton saying it in a before the final, saying, this is we were meant to win this, and for him especially coming in the semi-final, this is the way he performed in that match, the fact that it was against Munster, and then we go into a game against Leicester. It did feel like there was something there. Now, that was enough to get that extra level of performance out of what we were doing. So it was very important then, and it's a thing that we didn't have quite right in the 2005 Lions for the reasons I mentioned. But it is one thing that Gatlin seems to be able to develop. Whether that is inherent in him or the way the team, the backroom team that he brings together. There was a big departure the next Lions series in South Africa. You could see that it was a very different feeling around the camp than there had been in 2005, I think. And some of that comes with success, but I think there was more to it than just that.
For me, the Lions is so special. That 1997 documentary, Final Walk, was obviously the best video ever made. And we can all probably watched it 100 times. Yeah. And it made it so special. And I think, I've not been on a Lions tour, but ultimately bringing together teams, players together so quickly, you have to have an enjoyment level, you have to have a socialising, and it's going to be very hard for the boys at the moment out there to do that, but they're in a bubble, which means they have to spend a lot of time together, but they won't be having that fun. That entertainment is a hard bit, and it sounds stupid, you're there to do a job to win the Lions, but the more fun you have as a group, going out, doing things, the better you'll get on, the better you'll be on the field.
Do you know the other big factor, I think, in retrospect around the 2005 Lions was there wasn't enough players that were used to success against the All Blacks. Now, the team was largely made up of England players who had won the World Cup, but I think their peak was at that World Cup, and they weren't as good, any of them really, as they had been 2 years before, even 2 years before that. And that's not sort of being harsh. It's just that's where they were in their cycle, and that's why they won the World Cup. And then you had Irish players. We'd never beaten New Zealand. We'd never beaten New Zealand. I don't know, Scotland at that time. I think how many times has Scotland beaten New Zealand ever? Not many. And Wales as well. It wasn't as if they were turning them over. So there wasn't a huge amount of experience of beating New Zealand, less so in New Zealand. And that was a big thing, I think, for the England team in 2003. In preparation of that World Cup, they went down, you remember the summer before, and beat New Zealand. That was like, all right, it's on now. They know how to do that. They've been down there, they've beaten New Zealand in their own backyard, they can win the World Cup. And I think that instilled a belief, which we didn't have. And certainly I think I didn't have as an individual, that was on that tour, even though we were saying all the right things and I was, thought I was feeling it. But in retrospect, if you haven't done it before, it's very groundbreaking to do it. So that's no longer an issue, and it's certainly no longer an issue on this tour.
And it would be remiss of me not to ask you if you've got any dirt on Shawnee while he's not here. You must have something on him.
Listen,
what was he like when he first came in? Was he as bullish and loud as he is now?
He tells all the stories himself. He rats himself out. But listen, Shawnee was an absolute breath of fresh air when he came into Leinster. He was always a bit of a dog, But I do remember I got tapped up by the coach. Then was I think. Checker, who was super tough on him, super tough on him because he knew how good he was, and Alan Gaffney I think was a back coach, and Shawnee was sort of we at the time we had a sort of real weird training area where we would have some of the academy lads would be sort of in and about, and Shawnee was bouncing around. I didn't really know who he was, and I got pulled aside by Alan Gaffney, and he said, this guy is the real deal. He is, he's gonna be in the squad soon, and keep an eye on him. And I said, is there any plans to bring him in? But he had his hand in a cast. And he said, we can't get him in because he keeps on breaking his hand off people's heads. He at underage level, I think he broke his hand off someone's head in another 21 game, healed up, came back, broke his hand off of someone else's head a couple of weeks later. And then, listen, when he came into training, he did not hold it back. He was one of those guys that you knew. He wasn't going to take an ounce of a step backward from anyone, even as a 21-year-old, against older, well-established internationals. He was straight into the mix, throwing haymakers, and he never stopped. He's still doing it now. He's just doing it in a different way.
Yeah, one of my mates at Irish was saying that he's still the number one for getting in scraps at training. He's always
a bit of a hothead, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
really?
yeah. Listen, you have to have that. You need a little bit of dog, and you need it in training as well. And our best training sessions were where we were, there was a few punches thrown, definitely.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm waiting to hear the story of a young upstart basically chins him in training. And
wouldn't that be so good?
Because that honestly, it'd be a complete mic drop.
Yes.
And Jack, how's your rehab getting on, mate?
Yeah, no, good, thank you. Just chipping away at it, really. It's always slow and steady at this sort of middle phase that I'm at the moment, building the strength back up in the knee and just trying to get sort of to that point where I can run again, which would be nice to lace up some boots and get back outside rather than that gym and sort of turning more and more see-through and pale by the day. But might have to line up a couple of sunbeds before I'm back outside. Might burn instantly otherwise.
Vitamin D, eh? So it's wonderful for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for watching and listening to the House of Rugby, powered by Vodafone. Cheers, guys.
Thanks a mil.
Thank you very much.
You've been watching the House of Rugby, powered by Vodafone.